It's the final week of the NHL regular season, but unfortunately for the Pittsburgh Penguins, it's not enough to clarify their goaltending situation going into the offseason. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Penguins to Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, and let's talk a little bit about Tristan Jarry, because he has been one of the premier topics of conversation surrounding this hockey club since the beginning of the season. And rightfully so, because he's playing on a contract year, he's the starting netminder, and his availability has been the main reason why the Pittsburgh Penguins may miss the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. Tristan Jarry has had his most difficult season since joining the Penguins at the NHL level, and most of it, unfortunately, has been out of his control. It's hard to really put into words how aggravating that must be from his standpoint, because he is catching a lot of flack this season, and a lot of it is not his fault. Right? He's been injured. He's been dealing with a nagging injury to his hip. For a goaltender, that has to be very difficult. But his year, all in all, has been a roller coaster. Here's really how this has gone, and it's been the premier example of highs and lows and nothing in between. Right? No consistency whatsoever, and part of that is due to the injuries that he's faced. He had his first 4-0 start to his career earlier in the season. .941 save percentage in the first 4 games, and a 2.0 goals allowed average. That's a small sample size, but he got off to a red-hot start to the 2022-23 season. Then there's that initial losing spell of 6 games for Tristan Jarry, where the Pittsburgh Penguins lost 7 straight games for the first time since the mid-2000s, and Jarry in that spell was 1-3-2 with an .865 save percentage and 4.66 goals allowed average. Now, that's around when we heard about his, quote, physical issues, which to this day is still the most confused I have ever been covering this team, because nobody would say that he was injured. Nobody would say that he was going to miss games because of these physical issues, but he had physical issues. What was that? Well, later we come to find out it was a chronic hip issue that he had been dealing with. But after that streak of losing and those physical issues, it seemed like he got himself back on the right track. He had a streak of not losing in regulation between November 19th and then leading up to the Christmas break in December. He went 10-0-2 in that time, had a .942 save percentage and a 1.92 goals allowed average. So again, performing in that stretch like one of the best goaltenders in hockey. Then he has 3 rough performances leading up to the Winter Classic. All 3 of those games, he has a sub .900 save percentage. So then he gets injured. And that's when things start to get really interesting for Tristan Jarry, because he misses a handful of weeks. He comes back. Everybody's saying, all right, cool, we got the injuries dealt with. It's done. Now we go. Now we move. 2 games later, Tristan Jarry plays pretty well in those 2 games, and then he's injured once again. So now the issues start to creep in. Is he ever going to be healthy? You know, he wasn't available for the playoffs last season. This is now another issue, because we had plenty of questions surrounding Tristan Jarry and his extension coming into the season, and now injuries are creeping into there as well. That's becoming a list of questions that might force some people in the fan base, and has forced some people in the fan base, to want to move on from Tristan Jarry after the season. It didn't help that when he returned from the second time from his hip injury, he faced a slow road in getting back to form. He was 4-4-1 after that second return, with an .863 save percentage, 3.36 goals allowed per game, and as most people will mention, he was pulled 4 times in those 9 games. So even though he had returned from injury, and we even heard during that stretch from Mike Sullivan saying, he's not injured, guys. We're trying to get him back to where he needs to be. We're trying to get him back on track, back up to speed with the game. And yes, I questioned that. My co-host on Tip of the Ice-Burgh, Nick Horwat, questioned that and said, what do you mean he needs to get up to speed? It's been 9-10 games. Had several practices in that time as well. But the Penguins trusted him. And now in the past 7 games, it seems like Tristan Jarry's found his footing. The results haven't always come along with it because the team in front of him hasn't always played up to their standard. But in his past 7 games, Tristan Jarry has a winning record at 4-3-0. But he has once again above a .920 save percentage. .925 in his last 7 games. 2.14 goals allowed average. And of course that one shutout against the Nashville Predators. So over the last couple of weeks, Tristan Jarry's been playing some pretty good hockey. Did he put the injuries behind him? We don't know. We're not going to know in the last week of the season, and that's why I said at the outset of this that, listen, we're not going to learn anything about the Penguins' goaltending situation in the future in this last week. We just won't. You're not going to be able to answer very many, if any, questions in this last week of the regular season. The Penguins have 2 games against last-place teams who have really nothing on the line. At least nothing that winning is going to improve on the line. What do they have on the line? Percentage chances at Connor Bedard, and the only way to improve those percentage chances is to lose to the Pittsburgh Penguins. So we're not going to learn anything against this. And even if those teams had something to play for, Tristan Jarry historically is really good against those teams. 7-1-1 in his career against Columbus and Chicago combined, a .927 save percentage, and a 1.9 goals allowed average. So if he goes out there and they do have something to play for, which they don't, and he still performs well, it's just a historical trend. It doesn't answer any questions that we have had about Tristan Jarry. So you're not going to learn anything in this last week. You're not. The injury concerns are not going to be alleviated with 2 more solid games from Tristan Jarry. But neither was Jason Zucker's last season. Jason Zucker fought through pretty substantial pain to play in that playoff series last season against the New York Rangers. If you remember correctly, he couldn't even sit on the player's bench. He had to have a separate stool on the bench. He's been injured more than Tristan Jarry has over the past 3 seasons, right? Jason Zucker, that was the big question with him. Oh, is he ever going to stay healthy? You know, is he worth the $5.1 million? Was he worth what the Pittsburgh Penguins traded for it to get him? Heading into his contract season, injury was the primary concern, just as injury is becoming one of the primary concerns with Tristan Jarry. And where would the Penguins be without Jason Zucker this season? Having a phenomenal year, 20-plus goal scorer once again, and part of the immaculate top 6 that the Pittsburgh Penguins have put together for the better part of this season. So yes, injuries can be a concern. But as we saw with Jason Zucker, injuries shouldn't be the primary factor to deter you from bringing a player back, especially when the upside is as great as it is. And I would argue that the upside of Tristan Jarry, when it comes to impact on the team, is far greater than the upside of Jason Zucker. Not to take anything away from Jason Zucker, but position-wise and the ceiling of performance-wise, Tristan Jarry has a higher ceiling of performance in a much more impactful position than Jason Zucker does. So I'm not going to say that the Penguins must move on from Tristan Jarry because of the injuries. I'm also going to say that even if he stays healthy the rest of this regular season, it's not going to make me feel any better about his injury issues. But there is one thing that might be able to be answered after this season. If Tristan Jarry goes out there and performs in the next 2 games, and the Penguins win both of them, and somehow get into the postseason, that's when you can learn one thing. You can answer one of those questions. You can clarify one of those issues that everybody has about Tristan Jarry and signing him to an extension in the offseason. That he can play in the playoffs. It's another reason why people are saying, what's the difference? You should miss the playoffs if you're the Penguins. It gives you a better draft pick. No, that's a horrible, horrible reason to miss the playoffs. Because what are you stocking up that 15th overall pick for? Right? The difference between 15th overall and 19th overall, is it really that great when you're trying to win a Stanley Cup in the remainder of the Crosby era? Owen Pickering's phenomenal. He's at the AHL level now. It's great to have a prospect like him. Is he really going to make a difference next year? No. Is he going to make a difference the year after that? Probably not. He might play at the NHL level. He's not going to be a difference maker. So, the Penguins must make the playoffs to answer one question about Tristan Jarry. Can he perform in the playoffs? And if he can't, makes it easier to move on from him. But if he is able to go out there and perform better than his career numbers at .891 save percentage, 3.00 goals allowed average in the postseason, a solid performance, even in a losing effort, will go a long way towards bringing Tristan Jarry back in the contract negotiations this summer. But you're not going to get any answers in the next 2 games. You're not. Right? And the injury issues, you're not going to get any answers probably the rest of this season. Even if he stays healthy, you're not going to have the answer to that. Just with Jason Zucker, the only answer you're going to get is to play him next season and hope that he stays healthy. All that tells me is you need a better insurance policy. The insurance policy this year, after Tristan Jarry suffered his first injury last season, let's not forget that. Before last season, there was no issues with Tristan Jarry's health. And it was late in the season as well. And he had already played more games than he probably should have as a starter. But a New York Islander runs into him. He breaks his foot. Unfortunate. That was the reason the Penguins were without him in the playoffs. Ron Hextall said, you know what, the insurance policy, if he's still dealing with an injury, if he gets injured again, we're comfortable with Casey DeSmith, said Ron Hextall. Well, that wasn't enough of an insurance policy this year. So if anything, you need a better insurance policy. Likely, probably not locking up Tristan Jarry to a 5-6 year deal also probably on the docket, because you do have those questions about injuries, because those aren't going to get alleviated anytime soon. I probably see him getting something around $5 to $5.5 million still, but that's semantics. That's something to talk about in the offseason. But the point of this all is that it's going to be an important final 2 games of the season for Tristan Jarry and the Pittsburgh Penguins, but at the end of the day, it's not going to answer anything about Jarry's future in Pittsburgh unless the Penguins are able to make the playoffs. That's going to do it for this episode of Penguins to Go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins, or you can find us anywhere you get your podcast from. Just search Tip of the Ice-Burgh on your podcast app, and we should pop up there in the same feed. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys next time.